Good morning. It is Wednesday, September 24th, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, 140 world leaders opened the United Nations General Assembly in New York today with the Islamic State threat and the Iranian nuclear plan as the main topics on the agenda. Israel shoots down a Syrian fighter jet after it enters the country's airspace. And later on the show, an interview with Keren, Shayo, who directed the award-winning documentary, Sound of Torture. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin with our main topic of the day. The UNGA opens today in New York City, and as 140 world leaders gather annually, it seems the Middle East dominates the agenda, as it usually does, yet this time more than ever. The Obama administration's primary objectives in the Middle East will be presented to the Assembly, namely combating and containing Daesh, the Islamic State, and countering Iran's nuclear program. The White House has insisted that the two issues are entirely separate. But while the U.S. is seeking a role for Iran in the fight against the extremists, Tehran is chafing at what it considers tough U.S. demands for a deal in nuclear negotiations. And of course, there's the coalition of Arab states fighting alongside the United States, a coalition of conflicting ideologies, who by the end of the battle may seek different outcomes. Tough agenda for the U.S. president, and we are joined in studio by the co-chair of the Republicans abroad in Israel, Mr. Mark Zell. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Yael.
And by the American Democratic Party in Israel spokesperson, Mr. Sheldon Shore. Good morning to you. And I'm very happy to see you, gentlemen. It's been quite a while. Before we break this down, let's hear what President Obama had to say yesterday in New York as he was meeting with some members of the coalition set up to combat ISIL.
Well, it is a wonderful opportunity for me to welcome these leaders, friends, partners from the region, and to say thank you to all of them for their participation and commitment to rolling back the violent extremism that has so disrupted Iraq and Syria and threatens the region as a whole. And in addition to His Majesty, King Abdullah, I want to give a special welcome to Prime Minister Abadi and say congratulations to him for his leadership, to our friends from Saudi Arabia, from Bahrain and Qatar. We want to thank you very much for everything that you have done, and the United Arab Emirates as well. This represents partners and friends in which we have worked for very many years to make sure that security and prosperity exists in this region. And what we've all seen is that with the emergence of ISIL, so much progress is threatened, and so many people's lives are threatened. And because of the almost unprecedented effort of this coalition, I think we now have an opportunity to send a very clear message that the world is united, that all of us are committed to making sure that we degrade and ultimately destroy not only ISIL, but also the kinds of extremist ideologies that would lead to so much bloodshed.
I'd like to start with you, Mr. Shore, by the American Democratic Party spokesperson in Israel. I'm looking at President Obama sitting there at the beginning. I mean, this is, all the people who are going to meet at the UNGA. This is a president who made it clear that he wants to disengage from the Middle East. I mean, maybe disengage is a strong word, but that, America has to step away. And here we are seeing something completely different happening over the span of a very fast period of time of not just, coming back, but airstrikes above Syria. Isn't this a dangerous agenda, given what he pushed over the course of the last several years of his presidency?
I don't think it was so much disengagement. I think what he wanted to do in the first term of his administration was to set a different tone and a different way of leadership. The previous administration went in guns blazing whenever they didn't like anything. And they went into Afghanistan, went into Iraq without justification, as it turned out, and caused a lot of disruption. And the Americans lost a lot of prestige in the world in terms of leadership because much of the world did not agree with the way that America was behaving at that time. So what Obama wanted to do, especially during his first administration, was to try to bring the world together through negotiations, through talking, through less disengagement in terms
But
of
several
arms.
years later, we're looking at a foe that
Exactly.
supposedly is much worse than Al-Qaeda.
Exactly. And therefore, certain negotiations could work in certain contexts. It will not work with ISIS. You do not have a partner in peace and to negotiation. Their goals and purposes are different. Therefore, you see right now Obama taking a very strong leadership role in the world, reassuming the mantle of leader of the world, and he's bringing together this coalition of international parties, bringing together the United Nations as a force to be united against ISIL, and I think is taking the right steps, even though it requires military action, something he preferred to avoid, but when it became necessary, he came in and he's taking the right steps.
There are the critics that would argue that Obama missed the boat, and Mark Zell, this is to you. Well, first of all, you must be happy because I'm listening to Obama and he sounds like President Bush.
Well, first of all, I'm glad the president's finally doing something. In fact, he's re-engaging to some extent in the Middle East. You have to disagree with Sheldon, as my customary approach. I think Sheldon just ignores reality. I mean, the president came in 2009, the speech in Cairo, which set his agenda for this part of the world, which took a very naive and I think, and historians have shown, incorrect view of the geopolitical situation here, and as the United States tried to reduce its footprint in the world, and particularly in the Middle East, disengagement is an appropriate word. That's exactly what happened, and embraced the Muslim world in a way that really destabilized the region, set the stage for the Arab Spring, and caused havoc not only in Egypt and in Libya and Tunisia, but also throughout the region we're talking about, Syria, Iraq. And what's happened is a vacuum, a political vacuum was created in the Middle East. ISIS came in as a result of that vacuum. Politics abhors a vacuum, of course. It came in, filled it in a way that nobody ever expected. Even this president, as early as a month ago, had no strategy for dealing with ISIS, and still doesn't recognize the real threat that this organization. He doesn't want to call it a war. He doesn't want to call it Islamic. He doesn't want to call it a state. I mean, it's one.
The strategy is an interesting point because, Mr. Shore, I'd like to ask you, and then you, Mark, the same, Mr.
Sure.
Zell, the same thing. What is the strategy of the United States? I mean, as we're looking at the United Nations Assembly opening today, bombing from the air, okay, but what is the strategy in the long term? I mean, clearly that's not going to, completely eradicate this recent foe. What is the strategy of the American foreign policy, which I think people in the region are wondering?
Well, look, we're right now at the very beginning of a new stage, and what's going to happen at the end of the day is something no one can predict. For example, one of the things that America and other countries as well, Israel as well, says one way of maintaining a war is bombing from the air. Right? This way you don't get feet on the ground, your troops are not as endangered, and it's cleaner and it's more safer. That strategy doesn't always work. It didn't work. It didn't work in World War II when bombing from the air, most bombs went awry, and it wasn't until American troops came in that the war could have been over. So will American troops be in on the ground in Syria at this time, in Iraq, and perhaps in Syria? We don't know. We don't know. It could very well lead to that. But at the first stages, at least, he's doing two things. One, taking very strong, effective airstrikes. Two, trying to get an international coalition, both international recognition that what ISIS is doing is wrong and that they are terrorists and must be opposed, and that will come out through UN declarations and getting the world behind this. And number two, by getting an actual coalition, including Arab Sunni countries.
Well, the actual coalition is, okay.
Well, Yael, first of all, there's a problem here. The United States is taking action, but it's taking action without a strategy. And this has been dramatically demonstrated by remarks of the administration itself. I mean, you had the president announcing the decision to degrade ISIS by attacking ISIS command and control structures within Syria on the one hand. At the same time, his chief of staff comes out and says, that's not enough. We're going to have boots on the ground, which you yourself intimate might be necessary. And what was the administration's reaction to this after the Dempsey made his remarks? Never, never, never. That's a direct quote. Now, What that demonstrates is that that this administration still hasn't formulated a clear policy and a strategy for the region, and that is dangerous. In other words, to go in and to launch aerial attacks and to kill not only ISIS people, but apparently a lot of civilians as well.
100 civilians were killed overnight in Syria.
To do that without a clear, without a strategic context is, in my view, folly, and will only cause the United States to make future mistakes in this area more than it has already done during the course of this president's administration. And the only thing that's going to change that is if America actually, and this administration actually, rejects Obama's whole approach to American foreign policy in the world and the region, something that I think is very unlikely to happen.
And I don't think there's any basis for thinking that the Pentagon is going in without a strategy, or that Obama's going without a strategy. Excuse me.
It's not
where
the
it's pretty
Pentagon,
clear.
Sheldon.
It is pretty
It's
clear.
the White House.
The intention is, at first, if the airstrikes alone will solve the problem, then that would be enough.
You know that's not true.
In a second,
What will happen
ago,
next,
you
we'll
said
see
that
what
actually the
happens.
airstrikes may not solve the
They
problem.
may not solve the problem. They generally have not solved the problem in the past.
And they won't
so you
solve
may have
it
to go
here
to the
either.
next step.
And they won't solve
But
it
as
here
far as
either.
today, this is the plan.
But ground troops, I mean, Mark, no, seriously, ground troops, as you said, or sorry, as Sheldon just mentioned here, ground troops is something that President Bush did, and clearly that didn't work either. I mean,
it did work.
How did it work?
I'm sorry. Look, there were mistakes in Iraq, and this what we should not be doing is debating history. In the end of the day, those mistakes were corrected. By the time Bush left office, the surge occurred, and Al-Qaeda, which was then the principal terrorist threat in Iraq, was eradicated. What happened after that was that the United States made a decision, Obama made a decision to extricate America from Iraq completely, a decision which the American people supported. But it was a mistake. And what happened is it created that vacuum that I talked about just a moment ago. And into that vacuum arose this whole new animal, which is changing the face of the Middle East. It's changing. I mean, it's not just a matter of beheading. I mean, it's just erasing borders, disregarding 100 years of human history and political development, and trying to recast the region on terms that we see evident not only by the ISIS, by the way, it's also Iran. And it's also Hamas. It's the same kind of extremist approach to the region.
Speaking of Iran, Iran may be part, in one way, shape, or form, of this coalition that, the Arab State coalition that is assisting the United States in the battle against Daesh, i.e., the Islamic State.
I don't think so, Yael. I mean, they're fighting ISIS.
Saudi Arabia is as worried about Iran as Israel
exactly.
is.
And,
so being part of this coalition against ISIS can make them part of the coalition against Iran as well.
Yeah,
well, look what they've said. They've gone out. They've attacked the United States Syrian and aerial initiatives as illegal, along with the Russians and along with the Syrians. I mean, they have they're launching a major offensive against the United States diplomatically on this issue. Now, they have a commonality of interest with respect to ISIS, but that's as far as it goes. Iran itself is an extremist government and regime that still wants to acquire nuclear weapons, and that conflation of nuclear weaponization and extremism poses an existential threat for Israel and a real situation, a real threat to the United States and the Western world.
Yeah, but let's let Mr. Shores answer for a
No, I
second.
wouldn't exclude. I would not exclude the possibility, and it's the hope that the moderate Sunni states, such as Iran, Qatar,
Iran is not a Sunni state.
Saudi Arabia, and Qatar and Bahrain will join against this. But just the one thing I wanted to say about something earlier. Boots on the ground is not a magic bullet that as soon as you put that down, that solves the problem. It didn't work with the United States in Vietnam, please. It didn't work with the United States in Vietnam. It didn't work with the United States in Afghanistan and this. It is not a strategy. It is a tactic. If it is effective and does something, you do it. If it's not
Sheldon,
effective, excuse me.
Excuse me, Sheldon.
I will not.
You are
if it is not effective, you don't do it.
I argued that boots on the ground is a magic solution to this situation. I did not say that. The chief of staff of the Obama administration hinted that. I'm saying that the major problem to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East at the moment, and frankly around the world, is its lack of a clear strategy. To use a tactical device like ground troops or aerial attacks or anything else in the absence of a strategy, that's the danger.
Well,
That's
the strategy is to contain ISIS, and for this, Obama is doing a serious leadership in the UN to unite the world against ISIS, and I think that is the strategy, and that should be applauded.
I mean, uniting the world, one can, argue, and I'm asking this to both of you, he's united several Arab states behind this cause. At the end of the day, though, after this coalition completes or achieves a certain goal of this mission, these are states that would want something back. And that's something that I think concerns many people in this region, because it's like the coalition of the unwilling. They have conflicting ideologies. Isn't that also a danger coming out of this? Plus, let's never forget us. Let's talk about us for a second. Where's Israel in all this mix? Doesn't that pose a danger for the foreign policy towards Israel?
Well, under Bush Sr., when there was a coalition to fight against Iraq and to get them out of Kuwait, Syria was part of that coalition. Israel was excluded and received scuds. But after that goal was done, Syria went its own way, and the United didn't get anything specifically back. No one is, I think, to suggest that somehow Israel will be sacrificed because there is a coalition against ISIS. There's no basis for that.
No.
There's no basis for that.
Well, Yael, you can see one area where this is happening. For example, the fact that the administration, which is making a clear distinction between Hamas and ISIS, for example, is a reflection of this problem. I mean, just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the United States announced $70 million, $100 million grant to the UNRWA, to the Palestinian Refugee Organization in Gaza, which was collaborating with Hamas during the last program. And then and now we have
places need to be rebuilt in Gaza.
Well,
at the end of the day.
Well, okay, but what's the Israeli position on this?
You want to starve them out? Is that your idea?
No, it is not my idea. But the Israeli position. We're talking about the Israeli position. The Israeli position on this is that Gaza has to be demilitarized as a precondition to any kind of a multilateral reconstruction program. That's a reasonable requirement. But because of the administration is trying to build this what is now a very shallow coalition, sans Turkey and everything, in the Middle East against ISIS, it's making it's putting Israel on the side, and it's making a distinction with Hamas. And at the end of the day, after this thing is over, if ever it is over, I'm not sure it's a short-term program vis-a-vis ISIS. I mean, there's going to be a price to pay here by Israel and by some other players. I mean, Egypt. We haven't talked about Egypt in this situation either. Okay, which is now a part of a new geopolitical reality. So again, through no thanks of the Obama administration. All right. Now listen, I am glad that the United States is beginning to wake up. My hope and prayer is that the action that the United States has taken in the last few days to begin to expand the aerial attacks against ISIS will be accompanied by a fundamental reevaluation of its foreign policy in the region and the adoption of a clear strategy on how to deal with this problem.
But Mark, I got to ask you, what can be the clear strategy? You have equated, or if we're looking at Israel's actions against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, one can argue that they're not very successful. If this is a war against a guerrilla, force, it seems to be, just like ISIS, as you've compared it, and you've made that comparison.
Yes.
We're looking at a war in Israel that comes up every 3 years, that Israel has not really a clear strategy of how to combat that. What is the United States strategy? What should it be?
Well, first of all, the United States is part of the problem that Israel has faced in the last certainly the last three adventures in Gaza. The United States has put the brakes on Israel and limited Israel's options. I think Israel's strategy vis-a-vis Gaza is very clear: to eliminate Hamas, or at least to defang it, to demilitarize it. The problem is that Israel has not been allowed the latitude in the international community, led principally in the last 6 years by the United States, to do that. And if the United States would retool its foreign policy and abandon the kind of naive thinking that Obama demonstrated in the 2009 Cairo speech, understand what is really happening here in the Middle East, it would back Israel's attempt to really solve the Gazan problem. That I don't believe that's going to happen. I wish it were, but I don't believe it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, if you look at, go ahead.
No,
before I
no,
ask the question.
no, no. I was just going to suggest that it's not just the United States that was against Israel's adventures into Gaza.
True.
The Europeans are very much against it, and forced Mr. Obama as the leader of the Western world. They went to him and said, "You've got to stop the Israelis from killing civilians, etc." Now, we don't have to start.
Are you serious?
I'm serious that he was reflecting
I'll let the viewers
European.
decide
Excuse me.
whether to buy
He
that
was
line.
reflecting. He was.
That's
he was
quite a spin.
Why do you interrupt me all the time? He was reflecting. He
In
was
the name of
reflecting.
truth,
He was.
Sheldon.
So let me speak
Give me
for
a
a
break.
second. Yes.
And he was reflecting the European pressure to stop the Israelis from killing. Now, don't tell me about defensive shields and there's justifications.
No, but
this was
what you've just said. Listen to what you've just said, Sheldon. You said the United States, the foremost power in what we used to call the free world, has been cowed into formulating its own foreign policy by the Europeans.
It also has to reflect, as the leader of the Western world, it has to reflect the constituents, and that includes the American people who are against wars and would try to hold back the United States from entering into wars, and it's to hold back from the Europeans,
Sheldon,
and he has to reflect that.
No, but
I'm sorry, but I mean the question is leadership. Okay, you're the one that used leadership. You said this president is leading.
A leader
leadership
does not
means leading. You need. There's a program that just
leadership
finished.
does not mean pulling out guns and shooting whenever you feel like it.
There's a program that just finished showing the United States about the Roosevelt family called An Intimate History,
PBS.
making all kinds on PBS. Is making all kinds of great reviews, and I've been watching it myself. I mean, you talk about leadership. May not agree with what each of these Roosevelt presidents may have had on their agenda, but they were leaders. They were true leaders.
Good.
And Franklin Roosevelt, with whom I have a lot of issues, took the United States from being into World War II. He did it with leadership, despite the fact that the American people
must be very
was
happy.
Universally opposed to what he was trying to do.
In that case, you must be very happy with Obama, who's taking serious leadership against ISIS, who is going to the UN and taking leadership on climate control and on fossil fuels. I think that he's demonstrating leadership that you must respect.
But one second, we have Ayelet Vardi. She's I-24 News contributor from New York, joining us on the phone right now because the UN General Assembly is opening today. Ayelet, good morning to you.
Good morning, Yael.
Well, thank you for being with us. Just before we continue here, what is expected today at the UNGA, and what challenges does President Obama face when he's about to give a speech that will deal mainly with the Middle East?
Well, the speech of the American president, as every year, generates a lot of hope, expectation, and this year is no exception. With Obama receiving very low poll rating, especially over his foreign policy, it is a good time for him to try and reassert his leadership on the world stage. So he's sure to talk about the threat of ISIS. Tomorrow afternoon, he chairs the Security Council meeting on ISIS and other terrorist groups using foreign fighters in Syria, and Obama will try to pass a resolution on that topic. From there, he is likely to repeat today's message on the importance to the act on climate change. His speech today called on the world to do something and listen to the people, referring to the worldwide marches which took place on Sunday.
Right.
Ebola is an issue that he is also likely to discuss, which with close to 2,000 people who died from the Ebola virus. It seems like it is going to be the worst epidemic of the 21st century so far.
But he's definitely going to focus on the Middle East, I'm assuming, right? Where he's going to focus on ISIS and the threat of ISIS. Do we have any idea if he's going to speak about Iran?
We don't know yet what to expect about Iran. There is much negotiating going on the sidelines. Some questions as, will he meet with Rouhani or not?
Right.
We don't know yet, but expect nothing major to be announced on the Iranian track. It might well be that he gives only a brief mention of them, which is a worry to many commentators who feel ISIS has led him to take his eye off the Iranian nuclear threat.
Right. Ayelet Vardi, joining us from New York, you'll be following the UN General Assembly meetings, gathering speeches throughout the next week. Thank you for being with us this morning. I want to revert back a little bit to Iran because there are reports that there is Iranian fighters on the ground in Iraq assisting the Kurdish Peshmerga to fight ISIL. So they're going to be in this mix, and at the end of the day, we have another month, I believe it is, for the Iranian negotiations with the world powers to conclude Where does that put, I mean, I'm reverting back to, cause and effect of having to set up certain coalitions, be it on the front stage or behind closed doors, that will afterwards need to be dealt with. And maybe the United States needs Iran in this fight against ISIL.
Well, look, my view is that first of all, I think there are Iranian Revolutionary Guards in Iraq. From my information, that is correct.
It's been reported.
Yeah, and I believe, and I've said this already here on the station, that the American military is in touch with them, and they must be in touch with them in order to avoid destroying or any damage to each other's forces, even if that contact is minimal. So that much I think is happening. We can assume it's happening now, even though the leadership may be denying it. And I don't see any way around that right now. What I think also is happening, though, because of the basic philosophy of this administration, President and the Secretary of State, is I think that there will be compromises made on the nuclear front. We've heard a number of experts come out and say in recent days that the Iranian threat is really not a threat. It's not an existential threat, and they're in fact stopping their enrichment program, and therefore there's a great hope that we can reach an agreement with the Iranians and when the negotiations resume in November. Well, that I think is indicative of some thinking at the White House. So therefore, I am worried that the White House.
We've got just 1 minute left, Sally Sheldon. Is this a shifting foreign policy for the American Democratic president of actually making new friends that he needs right now in a battle against ISIL? You can't separate the two issues, ISIL and the need for regional partners that are helping right now.
Yeah,
Real quickly.
All right. Well,
No,
it's a question. This is the problem in any case. Who knows what the Iranians want to do? Who knows in any case what the future would be? So if you're pessimistic and you're hardline, then you'll go and say, no, they're bad. No matter what they say, they're always bad and they'll never be good. So we have to fight them at all times. Whereas if you're more optimistic, you can say there is an opportunity for getting things together.
In other words,
what is the truth? I don't know.
It's
what
dream
will happen in the
versus
future?
reality. I mean, he's a dreamer.
Right, and you were thinking
And
reality is
we look at
necessarily
reality
to be
straight in the face.
You want to be pessimistic, and
Pessimistic? I'm trying to
unfortunately,
survive.
I happen to agree with you because I think I'm more pessimistic about Iran rather than optimistic. But what can you do?
Mark Zell and Sheldon Shore, thank you so much for being with me this morning. As we said, UN General Assembly meeting today. When we get back, a very interesting high court decision in Israel about the detention center for migrant workers. We'll tell you all about it.
I want to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Rosh Hashanah Sameach. There we go. First, the headlines. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition, September 24th, 2014. The place you should be, and you know why? Because this is where we say hello and good morning to Anthony Grant, who joins me daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines. Tony, hit me.
Good morning to you.
Yes.
It's feeling like fall out there, isn't it? Not.
Okay.
Anyway, but anyway.
We're scaring our
Yeah,
guests.
no, it's not
Yeah.
fall yet,
Yeah.
officially, I guess. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about some American headlines, which of course are all about American strikes against targets
Definitely.
in Syria
The
with
campaign
ISIS.
has begun.
Yeah, and a lot of visuals which are almost supplanting some of the headlines. Look at the Los Angeles Times from late yesterday saying that Obama reaffirms commitment to fight against militants after airstrikes, and some pictures of looks like things being launched from big ships in the direction of Syria. And this is echoed in papers from the Washington Post, the New York Times.
So, Obama reaffirms commitments.
That's one of the tomahawks going off on its trajectory, but it's powerful imagery there.
Imagery
in the
that
press.
sadly is so reminiscent of the 2003 strikes of the Iraq War. It seems like the never-ending entanglement of the United States in the region. As I said to my guests in the first half hour, it's Obama sounding almost like Bush in many ways.
In many ways, and also it contributes to some of the intrigue that we're seeing in some of the other papers around the world, like La Stampa, which is a great Italian newspaper, talks about Obama's second front and the pact with Assad. So, what's going on with that? We know there was there the notification to Syria? Was it back channel?
Right.
And that's very intriguing to a lot of European partners who are not part of the coalition here. But
no, fascinating because it was this time last year that actually Obama was making very strong speeches and drawing lines in the sand against Assad.
Yes.
And right now he's actually in many ways joining the battle against the Assad's foes. But yes, the Middle East trading it, the messy hand that it is.
Exactly. And again, coming a very American paper here, the Stars and Stripes, of course, evokes Khorasan, the little-known extremist group targeted in U.S. strikes in Syria. And, the Drudge Report actually said, keeping up with the Khorasans was their headline. And it's sort of like all of a sudden we have this new group
because I was listening to his speech, or rather reading it this morning, thinking, who are these people? Now then we have a new foe. We had ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatnot. Now the Khorasan, and apparently intelligence reports this morning that they were planning attacks on the United States.
Actively planning and plotting, which may well be the case, but again, it's something that seems to have been trotted out, and when you get headlines like the one I just mentioned, it reflects that sort of, hey, what?
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. No. You said it here first. Yes.
Al-Mada, paper in Baghdad, says that, they say, I don't know, Daesh, Daesh
yeah.
uses scooters in Kirkuk to avoid airstrikes.
Well, that
could be an issue. Now, of course, this is a place that's.
I'm wondering if the entire Western world is mobilizing with smart bombs. Really, how can they combat scooters?
Yeah. It makes one wonder. I mean, there's a lot going on there. I mean, scooters can dodge things that the smart bombs can miss. So. Anyway, so that's one of the angles they're following. And of course, this is under it's a very oil-rich province in Kirkuk, and it's sort of the dividing line between the Kurdish-controlled territory and the area where the Islamic State is pushing in. So, again, if you're on the scooter there,
if you're on a scooter, or better get one. And call me a cynic, but I got to say, we have to remember that all these places where ISIL is gaining traction, and the United States and the West is so concerned, you just mentioned, is places like Kirkuk, where there's so much oil. Lots of oil.
Yes,
yeah.
And we could go on for hours about the impact of that on the whole situation. Speaking of going on for hours, a very leading British cultural authority has said that Germans are bewildered by the British obsession with World War II. So talk about going on and on for hours. And kind of a strange headline, right? Yeah, the director of the British...
What are the Germans saying? Let it go already.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like we've had it up to here with your complaint. Anyway, they sort of started it, so maybe, they're misplaced with their questions about the obsession.
Who knows?
But there's a new radio series in Britain that focuses on German history, and the head of the British Museum is sort of behind that. And he thinks it's time for the Brits to dial back on their obsession with just that one part of that one very small
part of history.
But small part, but you could say quite impactful part of German history.
Given the fact that you still have some people who lived through the Blitz, it might be harboring some kind of emotions. Yes.
Exactly. Daily Star of Beirut says that President Rouhani in Iran says that ties with Saudi Arabia deserve to be warmer.
Right, that's a headline. Okay.
It's interesting, isn't it?
No, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know maybe he'll rub shoulders with some
it's interesting given the
Saudis
coalition with the U.S. right now, and they want into that coalition, which of course always begs the question, where does that leave Israel? But
of course, I think the interesting thing about that is that these both governments in Saudi Arabia and Iran draw legitimacy from the holy sites that are actually in Saudi Arabia. So they're going to be together in some way, whether they like it or not. It's kind of
might as well. We can say to everybody in this region, bury the hatchet, people, for the love of Okay.
Well, it would be nice, but in the meantime, someone I guess who's not is Turkish President Erdogan, who is actually this meeting with the planned U.S. Jewish group has been canceled. I think it was supposed to happen yesterday, the day before, but we talked about that briefly yesterday. But that meeting apparently hasn't happened. Not exactly sure why. I'm sure he has a lot on his plate in New York, as everyone does.
Not looking good for him. We thought that there would be some sort of reconciliation there, but clearly not.
Yeah, not at the moment. Maybe there'll be a surprise reconciliation.
But he is. Yes. He's meeting with the Armenians.
Yeah.
Okay, Tony.
Anyway.
Stick with us. You're here also for the next hour, of course.
See you soon.
And we are going to move on to our next topic. On to our next topic, quite a remarkable one. Israel's High Court has outlawed a detention center where African migrants are held without trial and ordered some 2,000 inmates there released over the next 3 months. To hear more about it and this groundbreaking decision and its consequences, we are joined in studio. I'm very happy to be joined in studio by Advocate Asaf Weizen from the Legal Department Director Hotline for Refugees and Migrants. Good morning to you, Asaf.
Good morning.
First of all, I mean, this is a lot of work done by you and some fellow lawyers, I assume, correct?
Fellows in the organizations and me, yes.
Now, this is incredibly groundbreaking because I think people do not understand around the world how controversial this detention center has been in many, many ways. But it has been also a point of practice for the Israeli government in many ways to have these decisions then overturned. Tell me what is groundbreaking about the decision, and when is this detention center supposed to be closing down?
Okay, so first of all, this is the first time that the Supreme Court is canceling a law a second time. This law was cancelled a year ago, a very similar law that allowed detention of up to 3 years without a trial of asylum seekers who came to Israel. Mostly they are from Eritrea and Sudan, by the way. Supreme Court cancelled the law exactly a year ago, and the Knesset and the government ran and made a new law, which is even worse than the first one. The new law said that the detention will be only for 1 year, not 3 years. So this is an improvement, of course. But then they added this section about this so-called open facility, which, as the Supreme Court said just 2 days ago, is very closed, actually. It's not open in any way. And the detention there was unlimited in time.
They could basically take migrant workers and put them in there for what?
This is something that must be very clear. Migrant workers can be deported.
Right.
People from Eritrea and Sudan are asylum seekers and they cannot be deported. Therefore, the government said that they will be in these facilities, these detention facilities. And this is what the Supreme Court said again just this week, no and no and no. You cannot put those people in detention and you have to review their asylum requests and so on. Now, this is kind of amazing in so many ways because it's the second time the Knesset goes and legislate a law that is not constitutional.
Right.
And instead of finding a solution which is human and can stand in legal criticism, they are just failing. And we really hope, because we heard statements in the last few days, that they will try again to make the same law. And we really hope this will not be the case.
You're staying with us, of course. On the phone also we have, on the phone from actually joining us is Mutassim. Hello?
Hello, good
Hi,
morning.
Mutassim Ali. You are an asylum seeker. You are actually joining us on the phone from, he's in Cholot, correct?
He's in Cholot.
That's right.
Yeah, you are in Cholot right now. You heard about, I think Asaf Weizen represents you. You heard about this, obviously, this groundbreaking decision. You know, are you hopeful that this will pass right now, that this will help also in your release?
True. First, good morning, Asaf. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I miss you.
I'm happy to have this interview with you today. To your question, I'm really very hopeful and optimistic since day one. And I know things will change. And this is not so much surprising. This is the right thing and right decision that the Supreme Court should make. It's not a victory for asylum seekers, but also for Israeli law and Israeli judicial system. This is a norm that should happen, and now we're going to the next step, working with Israeli people to make change in this society.
Yeah, amen to that. But before we continue with Tassim, I want to, Asaf is a very correct point of it being supposedly an open facility. I want you to tell me a little bit about Cholot. How open is it?
Honestly, I have been to Saronim many times. When I first got to Saronim, I think I see no difference at all being in Saronim or Cholot, as all of them are prisons. The only difference is that sometimes I can walk out in the middle of the desert, maybe just to spend 2 hours and then coming back to the same facility. Think of it, this facility is built in the middle of the desert, where you can see no life. We have to sign in 3 times. We are there for indefinite period. The idea behind that place is to make the life miserable. At least in a real jail and a real prison, we know why we are there and for how long we're going to stay there. That's the difference. But Cholot is more miserable and a terrible place than even being in Saronim or prison. I think it's really very bad. And again, more than that is the mistreatment of the officials, the immigration authority, prison services. And again, I say this, the idea behind this is to make our life difficult, and the quiet successful in making our life difficult. So people were very depressed, and most of them, I mean, a lot of people signed and left the place.
Right. Mutassim Ali, do stay with us, advocate Asaf Weitz. And my question to you is, because critics will say that Israel has the right to, try and control its borders and not have so many people come in. And, the people of, I don't need to tell you that in South Tel Aviv, a lot of civilians are always, screaming up that they don't want, foreigners, et cetera, et cetera. What should be done? I'm not taking any sides here, but in 1 second, Mutassim, I'm just asking advocate Asaf Weitz, and, what would you say to those critics that can be done?
Actually, I would refer them to what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said over and over again, any sovereign state has the right to protect their borders. But Israel has a fence, and nobody is entering since the fence was built, period. Now, we have about 47,000 people that are asylum seekers from Eritrea and Sudan mainly. They cannot be deported. This is something that is given. You cannot change this. Israel is not deporting them. Now, what should we do with them? Should we put Mutassim in prison? Should we spend $500 million shekels on this? Or should we give him the right to live in dignity, to work, to have access to healthcare, and to be here as long as the situation in Sudan doesn't allow him to come back there? Those are the options. Now, you can be, and the Supreme Court said it, you can be creative and you can find other solutions. But any solution you'll find must take into consideration the facts. And the fact that you cannot deport those people, and the fact that you have to treat them with the basic human right according to the Israeli ground laws.
Now, Mutassim, you've been here several years. You were represented by Asaf, and this mistreatment, and we have to call it mistreatment, of being placed in facilities, clearly closed. I know, the situation in Sudan is horrific, but what does this make you feel towards the Israeli society and the places, maybe not the society, but the Israeli bureaucracy? Do you still want to be here?
Look, I mean, I totally go with the stuff, and I see the play. I mean, the situation as in Israeli society is really predictable, especially in neighborhoods that where, most of us are concerned. Let's specifically talk about South Tel Aviv. It's unimaginable and intolerable in a situation. But the thing is, we're not the one to blame about that situation. Nobody chose to be in that situation. I mean, even I put myself in the position of Southern Tel Aviv. I put myself in that place. But the thing is, because the irresponsibility policies by the government would make a situation like that. I think there is a way to tackle this. Since again, as I said, as I've said, nobody's coming. I mean, it's not logical at all to put people in the prison. Let's say 3,000, 5,000 out of 50,000 people in the prison to deter others from coming, or also to try to convince the society that this is the way we should handle the situation. It's just impossible, and you cannot make that by logic. I mean, we understand the pain of Southern Tel Aviv. We understand the pain of Israeli society, and I will be with them in the same struggle. But this is not the way we handle the issues like this. It is not black and white. There is a way to keep the interests of Israeli society. There is a way also to understand and to allow us to have a dignified life, gives our basic rights and human dignity.
Mutassim Ali, thank you so much for being with us. Asaf Weitz, and real quickly, does this give you faith back in the Israeli democracy?
Many people have told me that because of this decision, they feel they have more.
Yeah.
Right, and days will tell. I guess days will tell.
If this holds. Well, we hope Mutassim Ali comes out very quickly. Asaf Weitz, and incredible work you're doing. Thank you for being with us this morning. When we get back after mass marches around the world to mark Climate Day, the International Climate Summit was held yesterday at the UN in New York City. We'll hear all about it. Stay with us. First, though, let's hear some more of this morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, September 24th, 2014. This is still the morning edition, the place you should be. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Levi, and thank you for staying with us. Now, the next story has been going on for a long time and integrates Palestinians, environmentalists, and settlers, that usually never happens, holding the same agenda, which is opposing the security wall in ancient terraces in Batir. terraces that were designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in a bid to change the route of the Israeli wall. The Israeli cabinet has postponed decision on the controversial route of the West Bank barrier, and for that reason, we are joined in studio by the Israeli director of Friends of the Earth in the Middle East, Gideon Bromberg. Good morning to you.
Boker Tov, good morning.
Boker Tov. And before anything else, let's take a look at Tal Shalev's report about this story. Sound.
The Batir terraces, olive groves, and irrigation methods haven't changed for as long as anyone can remember. 7 natural springs feed the trees and crops, creating a fragile and sophisticated environmental and agriculture system dating back to the Roman era.
The whole families here in Batir, Palestinians, used to cultivate this land the whole time, the same way, and using all the crops in the area. Even it was called the vegetable basket of Jerusalem.
But the future of this age-old system is threatened by politics, as the terraces have fallen into the clutch of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since 1948, residents of Batir, 5 kilometers from Bethlehem, have enjoyed a unique set of understandings that allowed them to continue to cultivate their land beyond the Green Line, the old 1967 border, in Israeli territory. But Israeli plans to construct the West Bank security barrier around the village threatened to cut the residents off from much of their agricultural land and put an end to the tradition and the landscape. For the past 7 years, these terraces have been the subject of a harsh legal battle. Several Israeli high court decisions have urged the defense ministry to reroute the barrier, but the government has refused to reconsider, claiming that the damage to the terraces will be minimal. In an attempt to block the plan, the Palestinian Authority even approached the UNESCO World Heritage Committee, which recognized Batir as an endangered World Heritage Site in June.
Batir, it's not just a Palestinian heritage for Palestine, but it is a human heritage, since here there were many civilizations living here, like Canaanite, Roman, Byzantine, and that's why it's not just for Batir. We have to keep it a human and international issue to keep and preserve such unique terraces and water system.
Ironically, the current saviors of the Palestinian and environmental coalition opposing the barrier are the Israeli settlers of the Gush Etzion bloc, concerned that the barrier could prevent any future annexation of the bloc to Israel. The Israeli government was supposed to authorize the barrier's route Sunday, but following the settlers' pressure, the vote was postponed.
Both us and the Palestinians inherited these landscapes from our ancestors, and both us and the Palestinians need to leave it for our children unharmed.
The future of the Batir terraces still hangs in the balance, but residents are hoping that there will be no change to the way of life they have experienced for more than 2,000 years. Tal Shalev, I-24 News.
And so we're joined by Gideon Bromberg of the Friends of the Earth Middle East. First of all, a 7-year battle. How is your organization involved in it? What have you been trying to do to stop the wall from being built over there?
Well, first and foremost, we're the petitioners.
Right.
We petitioned the High Court on environment grounds not to build the wall through the terraced agricultural landscape. We think that the security concerns are completely legitimate. It's not a debate that security is not important.
Right.
It's an issue is, are we striking the right balance? And we believe we're not. We believe that we can maintain Israel's security by other means, by electronic means, by cameras, by sensors, and yet preserve this. It's not 2,000 years, it's actually 4,000 years of human heritage. It's the history of agriculture in a mountainous area. And we're not alone. I mean, the beauty of this case is that it actually split the government of Israel, because although the military continues to want to build the wall,
right,
another arm of government, of the same government, the Nature and Parks Authority, objects to the wall.
Siding with you, obviously, and not only that, I mean, we're seeing all of a sudden actually an agreement between, Palestinians and settlers about, the importance of the Batir terraces, of not wanting it to be broken apart, right?
Absolutely. So there's the field school in the settlement that is a very loud advocate for protecting the wall. But then there's other reasons as well. The settlers do not want to see the wall built at all because they want the Gush block to be part of Israel.
I was being too optimistic, you're saying. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, everybody's agreeing for the first time. But okay, the government is split within it. The army wants it to be built, and for 7 years this has been a battle. battle. Where does it stand now exactly?
Well, there's actually uncertainty because the court, the High Court of Israel, clearly was feeling very uncomfortable having to decide the case of the wall now that this is a World Heritage Site.
Right.
And not just any World Heritage Site, a World Heritage Site in danger because of the wall. So they sent it back to the government. In the media reports following the government, the cabinet discussions, it came across that the government decided not to decide. But when we look to the actual written decision submitted by the Attorney General, and we're fearful that this is what's going to return to the High Court of Israel, there is a decision not to alter the previous decision. A little bit of disclarity, but nevertheless, this could give grounds for the High Court to decide to move forward. So we are very fearful, and we will maintain our pressure, both locally,
right, and
together with the Nature and Parks Authority, and internationally, that we must preserve this site, not just for ourselves, but for all future generations. It's actually Moshe Dayan that back in 1949 struck the right balance. When he negotiated with the Jordanians the Green Line, he decided to keep that area open, allow the Palestinian farmers to work their lands, even if they're in Israel. He understood.
Because of the importance, specifically that area, Batir, the terraces in Batir?
The only case throughout the Green Line where Palestinians have been recognized that their land continues into Israel and they have free access to maintain those fields. Moshe Dayan was incredibly wise. He understood that by working together we can protect both security and landscape, which he so much valued. We hope that our leaders today can be as wise as Moshe Dayan was then.
No, and as you said, I mean, striking the right balance, and once you have, happy people, usually, it kind of solves strife around. Real quickly, though, the UNESCO, turning Batir into a UNESCO Heritage Site, is that something also that your organization pushed, that came about because of Friends of the Earth Middle East?
We certainly supported that effort. It's a controversial effort.
Exactly.
It's a controversial effort. We did support that effort. We thought that World Heritage should be beyond politics. World Heritage is not Palestinian heritage, not Israeli heritage. It's World Heritage.
Yeah.
If this site has survived 4,000 years of hostilities, it must survive the current conflict for the benefit of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren.
Yeah, to survive the next 4,000 years. Gideon Bromberg, thank you so much for being with us, but stay with us in studio for the next item as well. Speaking of, nature, World Heritages, and the environment, we are always happy to have environmental journalist Neta Achitov with us. Neta, good morning. Very much an important day, or the day after, right? The UN Climate Summit culminated yesterday, and I'm in New York, and I'm wondering, because we had President Obama actually give a speech over the stage yesterday in New York regarding, world climate. Let's hear what he had to say. No. Actually, we don't have that. What did he say?
I can tell you.
Yes, do tell me what Obama said.
Obama said that it's certain that there is climate change and it's due to human, action.
Due to us.
And and
it's because of us. Yes.
He was very nice to China. You can say he called China. It said, China and the U.S. are the biggest emitters, and we are leaders of the world, and we should be, in the forefront of fighting climate change and reducing pollution and so forth. And he was very positive in a way. And in every sentence that he said fossil, he also said pollution, because he really, I think, it's my opinion, but it was like to connect the two and tell the world that this is what he thinks, and that because there was a huge protest. I will talk about it later, but the protest called for 100% clean energy. So Obama kind of did a gesture for the protesters and said
that their plight was heard. He also, he also basically announced some sort of an initiative that's going to come about?
He always announces
the initiative,
initiatives. He has a bad time in Congress to push them through, but he really wants to be the greenest, president, and he wants to leave a legacy of environmentalism and of change, actually really a change, in the field. He said that they will reduce emissions until 2050. But this is not the most exciting announcement.
What is
there.
the most exciting announcement?
The vice premier of China was there, and he said that China will take it really seriously now, and they will reduce emission, and they will actually, take the offer of Obama and will lead the world into a better future. Another really exciting.
It's the first time China has actually, said that.
Yes. Yes, it's the first time they've said that, and this is really important because the last time in 2009 in Copenhagen there was another summit, and it was a terrible one. They couldn't agree on anything. China wouldn't sign on anything. The protesters were arrested. 2,000 of them were actually detained there. It was really a chaos and violent and with very bad feelings. And the feeling it was that this time, like, everybody was, oh yes, we're friends, we love Earth.
Guido's happy.
Everybody was so positive. It was really.
I'd say.
Yeah, I'm happy. Although until we see actual obligations,
yes,
feeling good together is important, but it's not enough. We need hard obligations.
Yeah, that's true. It was like warming the surface for the Paris summit that will be next year, and there will be true obligations. They're supposed to sign there. Really,
right. So now they've agreed to agree, but the paper is yet to be signed.
Yeah, it was like just hugging and being optimistic.
Kumbaya, okay.
Yeah, exactly. For example, the mayor of New York said that by 2050, he will reduce 80% of the emissions and the CO2 and pollution.
By 2050?
Yes.
Okay, so de Blasio.
Yes,
I believe him.
Yeah,
I believe that he might actually try and do that.
And also the leader of Brazil, Colombia, who else was there? Everybody was there. Paris, Ségolène Royal, the Minister of Ecology.
And Leonardo DiCaprio,
Yeah, Leonardo
right?
DiCaprio was talking he was talking really nice.
Really?
And very,
can we see that? Do we have DiCaprio? Let's see. Maybe we don't. There we go.
Here he is.
There we go. Wow, okay, that's DiCaprio looking actually very much like the Unabomber. I said that.
Kerry also said a really interesting thing. He said that 97... Oh, we do have him, no?
Undeniable climate
events, for a second.
Evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now. Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor. We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections. None of this is rhetoric, and none of it is hysteria. It is fact.
Okay.
Living.
Everybody was talking about that it's a fact.
It's a fact.
So Kerry said 97% of the papers, peer-reviewed papers, say that there is climate change and it's because of dew.
No, I find it, to me, it's mind-boggling that at 2014, okay, where we're looking of what man-made actions have done to this planet, we still have to, convince certain parts of society that this is not fact. That this is not actually happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
another really, really exciting thing that happened is that the Rockefeller family, the biggest oil family in the world, I think, they've said that they are actually divesting from oil and they're moving into clean energy. They have the Exxon company,
right,
and they are actually really moving towards into clean energy.
Isn't that because they sucked all the oil out of the ground already?
Maybe, maybe. Okay. And this announcement came after 3,000 people demonstrated in front of Wall Street, but this wasn't the biggest demonstration. The biggest demonstration was actually in New York, 80 blocks.
Wow.
Hundreds, thousands of people marched there in the biggest march ever
I'm so happy
for climate change.
I'm sorry it happened. I'm happy I wasn't there. Probably couldn't get a taxi. Yeah.
Yes, it was really, really amazing. And Sunday morning at 11, they started marching, and it was like really a celebration of green organizations and all over the world. 166 countries had the demonstrations, marches. It was really like a really green day. I've never seen such a thing before.
I agree with you.
Very exciting.
And you said you wanted to say something to say quickly about Israel in that respect.
We have a real opportunity here in Israel because we discovered gas off the Mediterranean.
True.
The gas fields are lower CO2 emissions than oil and coal, but we really have an opportunity to use the wealth funds coming from the gas to start heavily investing in renewable energy. So let's use that prize given to us to become a leader. Yes. I mean, we're blessed with the sun, and we're way behind the rest of the world in utilizing solar power to both improve our quality of life, our air pollution, and help save the planet.
And we have the opportunity to do that. Wow, that optimistic words. Neta Achitov, Gidon Bromberg, thank you for being with me. Happy New Year. When we get back, an interview with Keren Shayo, who directed the award-winning documentary Sound of Torture. Stay with us. First, some more of the morning headlines. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News, September 24th, Wednesday, 2014. And we are very glad you're here because our next segment is incredibly important and quite a feat for the director of this movie. We are joined in studio by the director of Sound of Torture that won the Israeli Ophir Award. That's like the Israeli Oscars, I have to say. Sunday night for Best Documentary, Keren Shayo. Keren, good morning to you.
Good morning, Yael.
And thank you for being with us. Before we start this, because this is an amazing film with a very important subject that we touched on a little bit in the previous segment of the show, let's take a look right now at the trailer for the film, which is called The Sound of Torture. Keren Shayo, the director, is here with us. Let's take a look at the trailer of Sound of Torture.
Dear listeners, this is Meron Stefanos broadcasting from Stockholm, Sweden, Voices of Eritrean Refugees. The goal is like, I want to end this. قصنا قصة رأينا وحاسة كفرنا نعلم كعب يعني أنت مو إسرائيل راح لنا كلكم ذلك. كم ذيك فيلك؟ ثلاثة؟ شيء 25,000. They were melting plastic bags and dropping it in their bags. And this is the burns.
زي عندنا بالخم قصصة إرتراوي بخلطة بالغراز حرق زمان. كم دي بهلنا؟ كم دي بيخون تاتنا؟ نابي يخون كتكلم بينهم. نابي.
بشا زودي يا مرارم. شاب زي قلتكم يا تشلا يا مدانا شو شاب.
We are going to a dangerous area where almost 1,000 hostages are. These are the houses where they are. There's someone there. Hide the camera. Put it down.
The director of Sound of Torture, the trailer of which we just saw, Keren Shayo, is with us in the studio. Main character in this film is Meron Stefanos. Who is this one?
Meron is, she has a radio program. She lives in Sweden. She escaped Eritrea when she was 14 years old, and she got a refugee status in Sweden. And just in 2011, when she heard about the torture camps, she called to one of the numbers she got, and it was the first time she spoke with a hostage, yeah. And then she decided to broadcast it on her radio program, and because no one knew about it, and that's how the Eritreans around the globe started to understand that it's a big phenomenon.
Now, the film basically with Meron, who has the radio show on in Sweden, talks about Eritreans, refugees who are trying to flee the countries in Africa, are being kidnapped in the Sinai, and then the kidnappers call their relatives, demanding somewhere between what, $25,000, $30,000 for their release?
Yeah.
What happens in these, to the kidnapped people? What did you find out through the work on the film? What happens to the hostages?
Well, they're being held hostage for months, for a long time. And when they call their families, the kidnappers, they torture them.
As they're on the phone.
Exactly. To put pressure on their relatives to pay the ransom. And then the ransom is going up from time to time. And if they're not paying, they're just killing them. So we know about 5,000 people that already die in the torture camps.
5,000?
5,000. And we know about 25,000 people that've been there. And in Israel, we have at around 7,000 people that are victims of the torture camps.
As we saw, I mean, when you were with her at South Tel Aviv, people who managed to get out, whose families paid, what types of torture do they go through in those torture camps in the Sinai?
Well, it's really, I mean, we are talking about rape and about they are melting plastic bags on their backs. And I mean, it's horrible things. I mean, they cutting their fingers and their legs and yeah.
Through your work on this film, because this is horrific, I've heard of the torture camps as a journalist. I'm wondering what is being done. Is anything done? Is Egypt doing anything to try and stop this? Is the international community? What did you find out?
Not really. I mean, it's been, it started in 2009 and until 2014, no one got involved in this. In 2014, in February, the European Parliament, they sent the resolutions to Egypt government, and then they asked them to stop the human trafficking.
Because you call it torture camps, they seem to be set up. They seem to be like operational camps.
It is. I mean, that's what it is. It's, I mean, they're not even hiding.
Exactly.
I mean, they have phones, cellular phones, Israeli numbers. We're talking about 054 because it's very close to the border.
Right.
Yeah. And then you can call them, I mean, whenever you want. And you can speak with the kidnappers. I mean, they're not even trying to hide. And the police in Egypt, I mean, they know where it is. And I don't know why I mean...
And when you said, you know, that the resolutions that were passed only in 2014 demanding what? That Egypt does something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Has
there been any type of, we don't know if there's been any type of reaction to that. I mean, this is a film that has already won several awards, which I'm sure, you know, makes you happy, but at the end of the day, it's the problem, you know, out there that needs to be addressed. Mirona Stefanos, how did you find her?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking for someone. This is such a hard story to tell. And we're talking about so many victims. And I was really looking for someone that will give a bit, something that is a bit more positive. And I've been hanging around in South Tel Aviv, and I've heard in one of the Eritrean bars her radio program.
Wow.
Yeah, and I asked, and I mean, of course, everybody knew her, and they told me, called her. I mean, she's amazing. She's the only one that's doing something about it. And I called her, and I found her.
And through her radio show, does she manage to find people and help? I mean, help in what way?
Yeah, she's raising money, actually. She's raising the amount of money that needed to
release.
Yeah, to release the hostages. And she released many people from the torture camps. And there is, you know, it's like, there is a moral question around it, because you don't want to pay to the kidnappers and to make them, you know, more powerful. But in the other hand, you don't want to these people die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you said, 5,000 already killed by kidnappers throughout the years. People who have not had the ability to raise money are being killed. No, it's a terrible moral question, I think, that we ask in this region on many occasions.
Exactly.
Yeah, but she is one woman basically doing the work of, you know, that governments should be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that governments should be doing.
Yeah, but then, you know, the Eritrean government is not taking responsibility on their citizens. So, I mean, of course, that's why everything is, I mean, that's the big problem, actually. That's
And it's throwing, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I think it just heightens the question of, as we talked in another part of the show, the refugees, the people who are asylum seekers, why there is such a need to help these people. And I think this film very much so shows that. Where is it shown right now?
Right now it's going out in the cinematheques in Israel.
But internationally, though, you've sold this film in several countries,
it was, in many different televisions. 15 different broadcasters surrounding.
The Sound of Torture, Keren Shayo, the director of this very, very important film. Thank you so much for being with us. Again, the name of the film is The Sound of Torture. And I very, very much hope that a lot of people are going to see this and, and hear this story, and maybe, internationally something will be done to change this situation. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Shana Tova.
To something completely different.
And this time you're completely right. It is completely
different, right?
Yes,
yeah, I know.
yes.
Because it is Rosh Hashanah. And, Keren will agree that we need to raise some form of hope.
Need to eat.
We need to eat.
Yes.
Yeah, Rosh Hashanah being the Jewish New Year, the height of the high holy days. Not a big fan myself, but tell me.
Well, appetites are different around the world, and whatever they're going to be eating in Israel, in Japan, something else might be on the menu.
Okay.
Yes, Big in Japan is a bizarre cookbook filled with recipes involving the use of condoms.
Oh, God. No.
Yes. Now, it may or may not be.
Yes, Keren, this is completely different.
Yes, this is.
Wow.
It's.
Oh my Lord!
Big in Japan is all I can say.
I don't even know what to say right now.
Yeah. I thought it was a new kind of glass noodle.
Is this like how big is your sushi?
How big is your creative impulse to?
It's not the size of the sushi. It's what it's filled
No, I think
with.
there's a social message in this cuisine. As in all Japanese cooking, really. So.
What is the social message? You can't really say it. You
Just,
can't really say it.
Safe sushi.
Safe sushi.
Yeah, there you go.
It's safe sushi.
Yeah.
Definitely keep your sushi safe.
Yeah, and
practice safe sushi.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Or takeout or whatever. Actually, I wanted to mention it is Oktoberfest is upon us in Munich in Germany, which is great.
Yes.
So let's raise a glass to that. And in an interesting side note, they've sort of gotten some of that Oktoberfest spirit at Starbucks, where in Florida they are testing a beer-flavored latte. Yes.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, no alcohol. It consists of a dark caramel sauce and a stout-flavored infusion or something that makes your coffee taste like a roasted malt.
I'm slightly nauseous just listening to this.
They were inspired by the rise of craft beers.
You have craft beers. Food beast. That's horrible. Why? First of all, what's the point of beer if there's no alcohol in it? What is the point?
It's like one of those scratch and sniff stickers, like you can't eat it,
exactly.
but you get like the
but
whiff of.
Non-alcoholic beers, already do make no sense to me. And now a non-alcoholic coffee, beer tasting coffee is just America, people. It's
Florida.
America.
They're testing in Florida, and and if you go figure.
Yes,
and,
go figure.
And if you
Must
select
be,
Ohio
and,
locations.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you for that.
On a more arts, have you heard about this exhibit, Malkovich?
Yes.
Well,
I read about that. This is amazing. I'm so glad you brought this.
Photographer, Sandro Miller collaborating with Malkovich to recreate some of the most famous portraits throughout history, such as Migrant Mother. There is John Malkovich.
Which he looks exactly the same, but have you seen the one of him imitating Marilyn Monroe?
I think I have.
Yeah, you have. Do we have the Marilyn Monroe Malkovich? Come on.
There's also, he's as Marilyn Monroe, as Che Guevara. There they are side by side.
Yeah, there you go. Isn't it amazing?
It's really, he's so versatile. It's just,
there's something in his head.
Yeah.
No, but the Marilyn Monroe one, I was.
What are those, pink pom-poms?
Something like that.
It's roses.
I think, and then I pulled up with the
towel.
original one. The Che Guevara thing is also quite amazing.
Yeah, kind of frightening.
It's slightly.
Yeah,
slightly.
But he hasn't done much film work lately, has he?
He's supposedly one of those really insane talents. Not that I would know anything about that.
Well, anyway,
yes.
it's interesting stuff to look at petapixel.com. You can see the whole roster of the pictures. Of course, a lot of buzz about Cheek to Cheek, the Lady Gaga Tony Bennett collaboration, which is out now, the album, and it's getting good reviews.
Stick that knife in and twist it, why don't you? Now, I'm still horrified by the fact that Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga were here in Israel, and I did not see
neither
them.
But now you can, just download it, pay for it, and listen to it, and look at Lady Gaga's new look. It's the new normal look.
I was about to say, she looks almost normal.
Almost normal.
Almost normal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe it's the influence of Tony Bennett. It's a wiser, gentler Gaga.
That if you manage to get to the age of 88, looking normal, singing and dancing, that must be doing something for you. I love this. Old meets new. Amen to that.
That's weekend listening.
It is
highly
weekend
advised.
listening. No. Yes.
Speaking of interesting mashups, Madonna and Rihanna walk into a bar. This is.
And meet a rabbi.
Yes. This is actually not a joke. I was thinking about this for a long time. What would happen if they did meet? And they did.
And they did.
Along with Madonna's new boy toy, Timur Steffens, who looks like that.
Oh, come on. How old is this thing?
He might be, let's hope he's at least 18.
Oh my God, that's such a boy toy.
You know, and she just broke up with the last one, you know. But
who was 12.
Something like that. But actually they were at the opening of Sleep No More at some party at Manhattan's McKittrick Hotel. I think it's
Sounds like our life, Tony, doesn't
it?
Yes.
But actually Rihanna and Madonna did not have that much to say to each other.
Aren't you devastated?
I mean, I'm looking for the juice. It's like
for the juice.
They're kind of like hi. I mean, I'm thinking major rivalry there. Not too much to say.
They just occupied the same space. Your wet dream going. Real quickly, one last one.
Speaking of dreams, Leonardo DiCaprio's new girlfriend. Yes, her name is Tony Antonia.
It looks exactly like every other girlfriend he had.
Yeah, now,
blonde.
Hello Magazine, your one-stop source of upscale British gossip, lists 10 facts you need to know about her.
Really?
One of the salient facts is that she is not Bar Raffaele.
Yeah.
And she is not best friends with Bar Raffaele.
He just looks like her.
Just looks like her, a little younger.
Tony Grant,
Happy Rosh Hashanah.
New Year, happy Rosh Hashanah. Karen, thank you for being with us. I-24 News Morning Edition. We will see you again on Monday. If you're Jewish, have a happy New Year. If not, try the food. Thank you for being with us. I-24 News. We will see you next week.